Dr. Amelia Thornton's research boat had capsized in the Zambezi River when the pod of 12 hippopotamuses emerged from the muddy depths like prehistoric monsters from a nightmare. The 34-year-old marine biologist from Oxford University had been studying river ecosystems in Zambia when her engine failed, leaving her stranded in the most dangerous stretch of water in Africa, territory controlled by the deadliest animals on the continent. "Stay in the boat!" her guide had screamed before the first hippo attack launched him 20 feet into the air, his body disappearing beneath the churning brown water with a sickening splash. Now Amelia clung to the overturned hull while massive jaws snapped inches from her face, each bite powerful enough to cut a human in half. Her satellite phone was dead, her GPS was underwater, and the nearest help was 40 miles away through terrain that would take rescue vehicles hours to navigate. That's when she heard the distant rumble of motorcycle engines. 35 members of the Zambezi Thunder MC returning from a charity ride to deliver medical supplies to rural villages. These leather-clad African bikers were about to face the most dangerous rescue mission of their lives, against animals that killed more humans than lions, leopards and crocodiles combined. Would you like to join us for this incredible journey? Subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss what happens next. The Zambezi Thunder Motorcycle Club had been riding the dusty roads of southern Zambia for over 8 years, their brotherhood forged through shared military service in the South African Defence Force and their commitment to helping remote communities that rarely saw modern medical care or emergency services. What had started as weekend rides among former soldiers had evolved into the largest volunteer medical delivery service in the Zambezi River Valley. Captain Marcus River Tembo, the 43-year-old former paratrooper who led Zambezi Thunder MC, was completing another successful medical supply run to villages along the river when his satellite radio crackled with an emergency transmission that would change everything. "Mayday, Mayday, this is research vessel Zambezi Star," came a woman's desperate voice through the static. "British national, boat capsized, under attack by hippos approximately 40 kilometers northeast of Livingston. Immediate assistance required. My guide is dead. I'm trapped on an overturned boat. Please help." Marcus felt his blood turn cold as he processed the emergency. Hippos were Africa's most dangerous animals, responsible for more human deaths than any other large mammal on the continent. A capsized boat in hippo territory was essentially a death sentence, especially during the dry season when the animals were territorial and aggressive due to reduced water levels. "All units emergency stop," Marcus commanded through his helmet radio. "We have a civilian in immediate mortal danger from hippo attack. This is now a rescue operation." 35 motorcycles came to synchronized stops along the river road, their riders immediately understanding the gravity of the situation from Marcus's tone. These weren't weekend warriors or casual motorcycle enthusiasts. They were combat veterans who had served in peacekeeping missions across Africa and understood that hippo attacks were among the most terrifying emergencies anyone could face. Dr. Samuel Doc Mwanza, a trauma surgeon riding with the Lusaka chapter, accelerated his BMW adventure bike to join Marcus for tactical planning. "Marcus, hippo attacks are unlike any other medical emergency. If she's still alive, she's going to have massive trauma injuries that require immediate surgical intervention. First, we have to reach her," Marcus replied grimly, studying his GPS coordinates and cross-referencing them with the emergency transmission. "She's 40 kilometers into territory where our police and emergency services can't operate effectively. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments." Sergeant Isaac Croc Zimba, a former Special Forces operator whose nickname came from his expertise in river operations, moved forward with his tactical assessment. "Marcus, if she's surrounded by a hippopod, we're looking at 12 to 15 animals weighing up to 4 tons each. They can run 30 kilometers per hour on land and are faster than anything we've got in the water." The tactical challenges were unlike anything the Zambezi Thunder MC had faced in 8 years of emergency response operations. Hippos were not predators that could be scared away or negotiated with. They were territorial animals operating on millions of years of aggressive instincts, and they viewed anything in their water as a threat requiring immediate elimination. Captain David Eagle Banda, a former military pilot whose aerial reconnaissance experience made him invaluable for complex operations, was already studying topographic maps on his tablet. The coordinates put her in the deepest channel section of the river, surrounded by marshy terrain that will be impassable for conventional rescue vehicles. "What about helicopter extraction?" asked Lieutenant James Thunder Feary, the club's communications specialist. "Nearest helicopter capable of water rescue is in Harare. Minimum 3 hours flight time," Eagle replied. "She doesn't have 3 hours if she's actively under attack." Marcus felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders, like the familiar burden he had carried during military operations across sub-Saharan Africa. 35 motorcycles represented significant rescue capability, but they also represented 35 lives at risk from animals that could kill a human with a single bite. "Brothers," Marcus addressed the assembled Zambezi Thunder members, his voice carrying the authority earned through years of leading men in dangerous situations. "This is going to be the most dangerous rescue operation we've ever attempted. We're going into the territory of Africa's deadliest animals to save a woman who may already be dead." He pointed to the GPS coordinates on his navigation system. 40 kilometers through terrain that emergency services can't access, to face animals that evolution designed to kill anything that enters their environment. Anyone who wants to turn back has my complete understanding and respect. Not a single rider moved toward the exit. "Then we ride for Dr. Thornton," Marcus declared, "and we bring her home alive." The convoy of 35 motorcycles that raced toward Dr. Amelia Thornton's position moved with military precision through terrain that would have stopped conventional rescue vehicles within kilometers. Their adventure bikes and dual-sport motorcycles were designed for exactly this kind of emergency. Rapid response through impossible terrain to reach places where traditional rescue services couldn't operate. Marcus led the formation through river valleys and game trails that required expert motorcycle handling, combined with intimate knowledge of Zambian wilderness. Behind him, 34 other riders followed in tactical formation, their experience as soldiers translating perfectly to high-speed navigation through hostile territory. "Lead element, this is Marcus," he radioed to his formation as they approached the river. "Remember your wildlife protocols. Hippos are ambush attackers that strike from underwater without warning. They can outrun anything on land within short distances, and they view any human presence as a territorial threat." 25 kilometers from Dr. Thornton's position, they encountered their first evidence of the crisis. Pieces of fiberglass and scientific equipment were scattered along the riverbank, and the muddy shore showed the massive tracks of multiple hippos that had come onto land, a behavior that indicated extreme territorial aggression. "Contact ahead," radioed Croc from his position as point rider. "I can see the capsized research vessel, approximately 1 kilometer downstream. No visual on the civilian yet, but I count at least 8 hippos in the immediate area." Through binoculars, the rescue teams could see the overturned boat bobbing in the brown water, but Dr. Thornton was not visible from their position. The hippos were maintaining positions around the vessel, their massive heads occasionally breaking the surface as they monitored the strange object that had invaded their territory. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, "What secret do you keep?" "There," Eagle called out, pointing toward the far side of the overturned hull. "I can see her clinging to the boat. She's conscious and moving, but barely holding on." Through the powerful optics, they could finally see Dr. Amelia Thornton. The marine biologist was gripping the slippery fiberglass hull with both hands, her research clothes torn and blood-stained, her face showing the exhaustion and terror of someone who had been fighting for survival for over 2 hours. "Medical assessment from this distance," Doc radioed after studying her through binoculars. "She's conscious and responsive, but showing signs of shock and possible trauma injuries. Her grip strength is weakening. She won't be able to maintain her hold much longer." The tactical situation was unprecedented in African emergency response. 12 hippos controlled the water around Dr. Thornton's position, while the terrain prevented ground vehicles from approaching within 5 kilometers of the river. Traditional rescue boats would be destroyed instantly by animals that could bite through steel, and helicopter extraction was hours away. "Here's our approach," Marcus announced after rapid tactical planning. "We established defensive positions along the riverbank, with maximum noise and movement to draw hippo attention away from Dr. Thornton. Croc and Thunder will attempt water rescue using emergency rafts, while the rest of us provide distraction and covering fire." "Covering fire against hippos?" asked Thunder with the dark humor that combat veterans use to manage fear. "Flare guns, air horns, anything that creates noise and confusion," Marcus replied seriously. "We're not trying to kill them. We're trying to convince them that the riverbank represents a bigger threat than the woman in the water." The rescue operation that followed would never be reported by mainstream media, but it demonstrated courage and tactical coordination that would have impressed professional military units. 35 motorcycles positioned themselves along a half-kilometer stretch of riverbank, their riders creating the largest human presence ever assembled in this part of the Zambezi Valley. "All units, commence distraction protocol," Marcus ordered. "Maximum noise, maximum movement. Make these hippos think they're surrounded by the most dangerous threat they've ever encountered." The psychological warfare campaign that erupted along the Zambezi River was unlike anything the local wildlife had experienced in millions of years of evolution. 35 motorcycle engines revving in coordination, air horns blasting in synchronized patterns, and emergency flares creating walls of smoke and fire, all designed to overwhelm the sensory systems of animals that had never encountered such overwhelming artificial stimulation. The effect was immediate and dramatic. 8 of the 12 hippos began moving toward the riverbank to investigate these strange new threats, their massive bodies creating waves that rocked Dr. Thornton's precarious refuge, but also drew them away from her immediate position. "Window opening," Croc reported, as he and Thunder launched their emergency raft into the water. 4 hippos remaining near target, 8 drawn toward shore. Beginning water approach. The 2 former Special Forces operators paddled their military surplus inflatable raft through water that contained enough dangerous wildlife to kill a dozen men. Their approach required absolute precision. Too fast and they would attract hippo attention. Too slow and Dr. Thornton would lose her grip and drown before they reached her. "Dr. Thornton," Thunder called out as they approached her position. "We're here to help. Don't let go. We're almost there." Amelia looked toward the approaching raft with the desperate hope of someone who had given up expecting rescue. "Thank God," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the chaos of motorcycle engines and hippo grunts. "I can't hold on much longer." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The extraction from the water required split-second timing and perfect coordination. Croc and Thunder needed to pull an exhausted woman into their raft, while 4 massive hippos remained in the immediate area, any of which could destroy their rescue craft with a single bite. "On my count," Croc announced as they reached Dr. Thornton's position. 3, 2, 1, grab! In one fluid motion, they pulled Amelia from the water into their raft, just as the largest hippo in the pod surfaced less than 10 meters away, its massive jaws opening in a display of territorial aggression that revealed teeth the size of baseball bats. "Go, go, go!" Thunder shouted as they began paddling frantically toward shore while the hippo decided whether to attack or retreat. The race back to the riverbank became a desperate struggle between human determination and animal aggression. The alpha male hippo followed their raft for 50 meters before the overwhelming noise and confusion from the motorcycle distraction finally convinced it that easier targets were available elsewhere. "Package secured," Marcus announced with relief as the raft reached shore and willing hands pulled Dr. Thornton to safety. "Medical team, immediate assessment. All other units maintain distraction until we're clear of hippo territory." Doc Mwanza began his emergency medical examination, while 34 motorcycles continued their psychological warfare against the confused and agitated hippos. "Multiple contusions, possible broken ribs, severe dehydration and shock," he reported rapidly. "She needs immediate hospital care, but she's stable for transport." Dr. Thornton, wrapped in emergency blankets and receiving IV fluids, looked up at the leather-clad bikers who had saved her life. "Who are you?" she asked weakly. "Zambezi Thunder Motorcycle Club," Marcus replied, with the quiet pride of someone whose brotherhood had just accomplished the impossible. "We deliver medical supplies to rural villages, but today we delivered something more important. We delivered hope." The evacuation from hippo territory required the same tactical precision as the rescue, but with the added challenge of transporting a trauma patient through 40 kilometers of rough terrain to reach medical facilities. Dr. Thornton was secured to Doc's motorcycle using emergency medical transport protocols, while 34 other riders formed a protective convoy. "Control, this is Zambezi Thunder," Marcus radioed to the regional emergency services. "We have recovered the British researcher from Hippo attack site. She's alive, conscious, and receiving medical care. Inbound to Livingstone Hospital, ETA 45 minutes. The response from emergency services was immediate and amazed. "Zambezi Thunder. How did you reach her? Our rescue teams couldn't get anywhere near that location." "Motorcycles go where trucks can't," Marcus replied simply. "That's why we ride." The convoy that arrived at Livingston Hospital 45 minutes later created a scene that would be remembered by medical staff for years to come. 35 dusty motorcycles carrying a woman who had survived one of the most dangerous wildlife encounters possible, delivered by volunteers who had risked their lives without expecting any recognition or reward. Dr. Patricia Mulenga, the emergency room director, met the convoy at the hospital entrance with a full trauma team. "How is this possible?" she asked Doc Mwanza as they transferred Amelia to a hospital stretcher. "No one survives hippo attacks in the middle of the Zambezi." "She had help," Doc replied, gesturing toward the 35 bikers who were removing their helmets to reveal faces marked with dust, sweat, and the satisfaction of lives saved. "She had the Zambezi Thunder." The medical examination revealed the full extent of Dr. Thornton's ordeal. 3 broken ribs, multiple contusions, severe dehydration, and psychological trauma from witnessing her guide's death and facing her own for over 2 hours. But she was alive, conscious, and asking to speak with the men who had saved her. "I want to thank you," Amelia said to Marcus when he was allowed to visit her hospital room. "I thought I was going to die alone in that river. No one even knew where I was." "We knew," Marcus replied gently. "When someone calls for help, the Brotherhood answers. That's what we do." 3 weeks after her rescue from the Hippos, Dr. Amelia Thornton had recovered sufficiently from her physical injuries to begin processing the psychological impact of what she had experienced and what had been done to save her. The woman who had dedicated her career to studying African river ecosystems now found herself studying a different kind of ecosystem, the brotherhood of motorcycle riders who had risked their lives for a stranger. Marcus Tembo sat in the visitor's chair beside Amelia's hospital bed in Lusaka, where she had been transferred for specialized trauma care, reading the latest correspondence from Oxford University. The academic world was struggling to understand how a respected marine biologist had survived an impossible situation in one of Africa's most dangerous wilderness areas. "Your university wants a full report on your rescue for their insurance company," Marcus informed her, scanning the official letter with the amusement of someone who understood that bureaucracy rarely captured the truth of life and death situations. "What am I supposed to tell them?" Amelia asked, her voice still carrying the slight tremor that sometimes affected trauma survivors. "That 35 motorcycle riders materialized out of nowhere and performed a miracle." "You tell them the truth," Marcus replied simply. "You called for help and help came." Over the 3 weeks since her rescue, Amelia had been trying to comprehend not just her survival, but the extraordinary coordination and courage that had made it possible. The Zambezi Thunder MC had mobilized 35 riders across vast distances within minutes of receiving her emergency call, navigated through terrain that professional rescue services couldn't access, and executed a rescue operation in the territory of Africa's most dangerous animals, all without any expectation of recognition or reward. "In my field, we study ecosystems," Amelia reflected as she watched motorcycles arriving for their regular visit. "I've spent years understanding how complex systems work together for survival. But what you and your brotherhood did, that's a human ecosystem I never knew existed." The relationship between Dr. Thornton and the Zambezi Thunder MC had evolved far beyond the immediate rescue into something deeper and more meaningful. The British academic had been profoundly changed by her experience of African brotherhood, while the motorcycle club had gained a new perspective on their role in protecting people who came to Africa to study and serve its communities. Dr. Samuel "Doc" Mwanza had taken personal responsibility for monitoring Amelia's recovery, combining his trauma surgery expertise with genuine concern for someone whose life he had helped save. "Physically, she's healing perfectly," he reported to Marcus during one of their regular briefings. "The psychological recovery is more complex. She witnessed her guide's death, faced her own mortality, and then experienced rescue by people she never expected to encounter." "Is that good or bad?" Marcus asked. "It's transformative," Doc replied thoughtfully. "She's not the same person who came to Africa to study river systems. She's someone who understands what it means to be completely dependent on the courage and compassion of others." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The transformation was evident in Amelia's interactions with the Zambezi Thunder members who visited her regularly during her recovery. The reserved academic who had initially been skeptical of motorcycle clubs had become genuinely interested in understanding the military backgrounds, community service activities, and brotherhood values that had motivated 35 strangers to risk their lives for her. "Tell me about your medical supply deliveries," Amelia asked Marcus during one of his visits. "How long have you been providing healthcare support to rural villages?" 8 years, Marcus replied. "Started when we realized that our military medical training and motorcycle mobility could reach communities that official health services couldn't access regularly." "How many communities do you serve?" 47 villages across the Zambezi Valley, monthly deliveries of medicine, emergency medical response, health education programs, and evacuation support for serious medical cases. Amelia was amazed by the scope of their operations. "That's a larger healthcare network than most government programs. How do you coordinate everything?" "Military planning applied to civilian service," Marcus explained. "We treat each village like a strategic objective that requires regular supply lines, communication systems, and emergency response capabilities." The conversation revealed something that would fundamentally change both Amelia's career and the Zambezi Thunder MC's mission. The marine biologist's research expertise, combined with her new understanding of motorcycle-based community service, created possibilities that neither had previously considered. "Marcus, I've been thinking about something," Amelia said carefully, knowing that what she was about to propose would sound unusual coming from a British academic. "My research here was supposed to study river ecosystem health, but I keep thinking about the human ecosystem that saved my life." "What do you mean?" "I want to document what you do. Not just the rescue, but the entire support network you've created for rural communities. This kind of volunteer coordination and community impact needs to be studied and shared." Marcus considered her proposal with the caution of someone who had learned to be skeptical of outsiders who claimed they wanted to help African communities. "What kind of documentation?" "Academic research that shows how motorcycle clubs can provide essential services in remote areas. Documentation that could help other volunteer organizations develop similar programs. Evidence that proves civilian motorcycle groups can be professional, effective, and essential for community health." The idea represented something revolutionary in both academic research and motorcycle community service. Dr. Thornton was proposing to use her Oxford University credentials and research expertise to document and validate the Zambezi Thunder MC's operations, potentially creating a model that could be replicated throughout Africa and beyond. Doc Mwanza, who had been listening to the conversation, understood the implications immediately. "Amelia, are you talking about staying in Zambia to study our operations?" "I'm talking about changing my entire research focus," Amelia replied, with the conviction of someone who had discovered a new purpose. "River ecosystems will be studied by other scientists, but the human ecosystem that saved my life, that needs someone who understands both academic documentation and the reality of what you accomplish. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep?" The proposal required extensive coordination with Oxford University, the Zambian government, and the various communities served by the Zambezi Thunder MC. Academic institutions were initially skeptical of research that focused on motorcycle clubs rather than traditional development organizations, but Amelia's reputation and the uniqueness of her rescue story eventually secured approval and funding for a 2-year field study. "We're going to be guinea pigs," observed Sergeant Isaac Croc Zimba during the Zambezi Thunder MC's monthly meeting where they discussed Amelia's research proposal. "We're going to be documented," Marcus corrected. "For the first time, someone with academic credentials and international recognition is going to study what we do and explain why it works." The research project that began 6 months after Amelia's rescue represented the first academic study of motorcycle club community service operations in sub-Saharan Africa. Dr. Thornton embedded herself with the Zambezi Thunder MC, participating in medical supply runs, emergency response operations, and community health programs while documenting their impact with the rigor that academic institutions required for serious research. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Amelia's preliminary report showed that the Zambezi Thunder MC was providing healthcare access to over 40,000 people across 47 villages, with medical response times that were faster than government services and costs that were a fraction of traditional aid programs. The efficiency metrics are extraordinary, Amelia reported during her first presentation to Oxford University via video conference. They're achieving healthcare delivery results that international aid organizations spend millions trying to accomplish, and they're doing it with volunteer labor and donated motorcycles. Professor David Hartwell, her doctoral supervisor, was skeptical of results that seemed too positive. Dr. Thornton, are you certain your personal experience isn't affecting your objectivity? Being rescued by these motorcycle riders must create some bias in your research. That creates understanding, Amelia replied firmly. I've seen these operations from both sides, as someone who needed their help and as a researcher studying their effectiveness. The personal experience doesn't compromise the research. It provides context that pure academic observation couldn't achieve. The first year of research documented medical supply deliveries that prevented dozens of deaths from preventable diseases, emergency evacuations that saved lives in situations where traditional ambulance services couldn't operate, and health education programs that improved community wellness indicators across measurable demographics. But the research also revealed something deeper about the Zambezi Thunder MC's impact. The motorcycle club had become the primary emergency response network for a region larger than many countries, providing services that connected isolated communities to modern healthcare and creating trust relationships that enhanced every aspect of community development. They're not just delivering medicine, Amelia explained during one of her academic presentations. They're delivering hope, connection, and proof that someone cares about communities that are often forgotten by official services. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. 18 months after her rescue, Dr. Amelia Thornton had become more than just a researcher, studying the Zambezi Thunder MC. She had become an advocate for their work and a bridge between the academic world and the reality of African community service. Her presentations at international conferences had attracted attention from development organizations, motorcycle clubs, and government agencies interested in replicating the Zambezi Thunder model. We've received inquiries from motorcycle clubs in Kenya, Tanzania, and Botswana about establishing similar programs, Marcus reported during one of their regular coordination meetings. Your research is creating interest throughout East and Southern Africa. That's wonderful, Amelia replied, but I want to make sure we're sharing the right information. This isn't just about motorcycles, it's about military discipline applied to civilian service, brotherhood values that prioritize others over self-interest, and commitment that goes beyond casual volunteering. The distinction was crucial for organizations that wanted to replicate the Zambezi Thunder model without understanding the cultural and personal foundations that made it effective. The motorcycle club's success wasn't just about vehicle mobility or medical training. It was about the character and dedication of men who had found purpose in serving others. Dr. Thornton's academic research had evolved into something unprecedented, a comprehensive analysis of how military veterans could transition from combat service to community service while maintaining the tactical coordination and commitment that had made them effective soldiers. The psychological component is as important as the logistical component, Amelia explained during presentations to international development conferences. These men found meaning and brotherhood in military service. When they left the military, they recreated that meaning and brotherhood in civilian service that requires the same courage, coordination, and commitment. The research attracted attention from the World Health Organization, which was struggling to provide healthcare access to remote communities throughout Africa. Dr. Thornton's documentation of the Zambezi Thunder MC's operations provided a model for community-based healthcare delivery that was both effective and sustainable. Dr. Thornton's research demonstrates that properly organized volunteer motorcycle clubs can provide essential healthcare services in areas where traditional medical infrastructure cannot operate effectively, reported Dr. Margaret Ochieng, WHO Regional Director for Africa. This model could be transformative for rural healthcare throughout the continent. 2 years after her rescue, Amelia had completed her doctoral research and was preparing to defend her dissertation, Brotherhood in Motion, Military Veterans and Community Healthcare Delivery in Sub-Saharan Africa. The academic work, represented the first comprehensive study of motorcycle club community service operations and their potential for addressing healthcare gaps in remote areas. But for Amelia personally, the research represented something more profound, a complete transformation of her career and her understanding of what academic work could accomplish when it engaged with real community needs rather than abstract theoretical questions. "I came to Africa to study river ecosystems," she reflected during the Zambezi Thunder MC's annual celebration of her rescue anniversary. "Instead, I discovered a human ecosystem that taught me more about cooperation, courage, and community than any university course ever did." The celebration brought together members from all chapters of the Zambezi Thunder MC, representatives from the communities they served, and international visitors who had come to study their operations. But the focus remained on the principles that had motivated 35 men to risk their lives for a stranger: brotherhood, service, and the belief that protecting others is the highest calling anyone can pursue. 3 years ago, Dr. Thornton called for help from the middle of the Zambezi River, surrounded by hippos and facing certain death. Marcus addressed the celebration crowd. Today, her research is helping create similar volunteer organizations across Africa and beyond. She didn't just survive her encounter with those hippos, she transformed it into something that will save thousands of other lives. Amelia stood to respond, wearing the honorary Zambezi Thunder MC vest that had been presented to her as the club's first associate member. 3 years ago, I learned that miracles happen when good people decide to risk everything for someone they don't know. Today, I know that the greatest research happens when academics engage with communities that have something to teach the world. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? The impact of Dr. Thornton's research extended far beyond academic recognition or even the establishment of new motorcycle club service programs. Her work had created a new field of study, community-based emergency response systems, that attracted researchers from universities throughout Africa, Europe, and North America. But perhaps more importantly, her documentation of the Zambezi Thunder MC's operations had provided validation and recognition for work that had been performed without expectation of reward or acknowledgement. The motorcycle club that had operated in obscurity for 8 years was now recognized as a model for volunteer community service throughout the developing world. "The academic recognition is nice," observed Doc Mwanza during one of their regular meetings, "but the real victory is that other communities are getting the help they need because of what we've learned to do here." Marcus nodded agreement. "Amelia's research didn't change what we do. It helped other people understand why we do it and how they can do it too." The ripple effects of a rescue that had taken place in the Zambezi River 3 years earlier were now being felt across multiple continents. Motorcycle clubs in 12 countries had established community healthcare delivery programs based on the Zambezi Thunder model. Academic institutions were offering courses in community-based emergency response. International aid organizations were partnering with volunteer motorcycle clubs to extend their reach into remote areas. 5 years after her rescue from the hippos, Dr. Amelia Thornton had become the leading global expert on motorcycle club community service operations. Her book, Angels on Wheels: How Military Veterans Are Transforming Community Healthcare in Africa, had become required reading for international development programs and had inspired the establishment of volunteer motorcycle organizations on every continent. But for the Zambezi Thunder MC, the greatest reward wasn't international recognition or academic validation. It was the knowledge that their brotherhood had saved a life that went on to save thousands of other lives through research, advocacy, and program development. "She represents everything we hope to accomplish," Marcus reflected during their 5th anniversary celebration of the rescue. "Someone who needed help, received it, and then used that experience to help others." Dr. Thornton, now permanently based in Zambia as director of the International Motorcycle Community Service Research Institute, had become more than just a researcher. She had become family. The British academic who had come to Africa to study rivers had stayed to study the human ecosystem that had saved her life and discovered that some families are formed not by blood, but by shared purpose and mutual protection. "I came to Africa to understand how ecosystems work," she reflected during her anniversary speech. "The hippos nearly ended that research permanently, but 35 bikers taught me that the most important ecosystems are the human ones, the networks of care, protection, and service that connect us all. The news media had never fully reported the story of how 35 motorcycle riders had saved Dr. Amelia Thornton from raging hippos in the Zambezi River. Official reports focused on successful emergency response coordination without mentioning the volunteer organization that had provided the actual rescue capability. But the families they had helped, the communities they had served, and the international network of volunteer organizations that had been inspired by their example understood the deeper truth. Sometimes miracles wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles, and they appear exactly when someone calls for help in their darkest moment. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The legacy continued to grow and expand, but it remained rooted in the fundamental principle that had motivated 35 strangers to race 40 kilometers through dangerous terrain to save a woman they had never met. When someone needs help, you respond. When someone is in danger, you risk yourself to protect them. When someone calls for a miracle, you become that miracle. 10 years after her rescue, Dr. Amelia Thornton's Research Institute had documented and supported the establishment of 247 volunteer motorcycle organizations providing community healthcare services across 38 countries. The Zambezi Thunder model had been adapted to local conditions and cultures, but the core principles remained the same: brotherhood, service, and the willingness to risk everything for others. The British academic who had once studied river ecosystems had discovered something far more important: the human ecosystem of courage, compassion, and community service that connected people across all boundaries of race, nationality, and culture. And every life saved by the international network of volunteer motorcycle organizations carried forward the legacy of 35 men who had heard a cry for help from the Zambezi River and responded without hesitation. The Hippos had been defeated, not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by love, courage, and the willingness of strangers to risk their lives because someone needed help. And in saving Dr. Thornton, they had created a movement that would protect and serve communities around the world for generations to come. The news never reported the complete story, but every person whose life was saved by volunteer motorcycle organizations knew the truth. Miracles happen when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things for others, and sometimes those miracles change the entire world.